I'm starting to realize that all of life is cause for celebration. In the same way that all of life calls for tears, it has to call for celebration. I feel like we have to recognize the sort of relationship that positive and negative have to us, not necessarily to the world around us. Because in a real sense, I don't think, positive and negative are anything but connotations we place on actions or place on things in an external sense. And that doesn't mean that I don't think anything is bad at all. It means that you know, light and dark sort of exist at the same time. They sort of have to coexist for each one to have any type of presence. And when I'm saying that, I really just extend the idea that any type of negativity we experience has a counterpart of the positive. It has a equal good that can be sort of brought about by the experience. I don't mean that for necessarily everything, but a lot of the mundane things that we do to ourselves within our own mental processes, like when we take away from ourselves just by focusing on a past, or take away from ourselves in terms of harking on ourselves for negative things, treating ourselves like negative people and instantiating to ourselves that who we are is not sufficient enough for where we are. I think that we have to learn how to sort of celebrate ourselves for every chance we get. And I don't mean celebrate ourselves in terms of solely look at yourself and celebrate every accolade you have and everything you have, but celebrate yourself for living in a way, for being able to experience, for being able to go out there and experience positivity even after some type of negative circumstance. We have to give to ourselves sometimes what the world doesn't give to us. What the world doesn't give to you, you have to give to yourself. I feel like all of these things sort of mean the idea that you have to sometimes celebrate yourself when the world isn't applauding. And it's not always going to applaud you. I feel like sometimes the applause that the world gives to you is the applause you give to yourself because you're a part of the world. And I think a lot of times we don't realize that we also have a part to play in our own upbringing and our own support and our own celebration. We think that it's solely supposed to come from the external world and we're supposed to wait for other people to validate who we are, but that's not what validation is. And that's not what self-love is. I think true validation is validation you give to yourself. True self-love is without condition and it's something that you also give to yourself. And I feel like we condition ourselves to love ourselves and to appreciate and celebrate ourselves via some type of external stimulus, via some type of accolade or opinion or perspective when we can really give ourselves that perspective. And I'm not saying that to say reject all the people around you. I don't mean that at all. But recognize that sometimes people will carry their own weight. And you have to carry your own. And sometimes you have to lift it above your head and treat it like it's light. But what I found is the weight gets lighter the more present you are. The more you're not carrying the past with you, the more you're not carrying everything. It's always going to stay. Letting go is what makes it stay. You want to hold on to the good aspects of yourself. Holding on would mean that if you were to let go, it would no longer be with you. So letting go is what makes it stay, is to say that who you are is who you are regardless. And if you carry positivity with who you are, if it's within who you are, then you bring it to every situation regardless of whether or not you intently hold on to it. And that's why I think the idea of affirmations is very important, because it sort of teaches you how to carry stuff with you without consciously being aware of it. It'll teach you how to be patient without thinking about the opportunity to be patient. And I talk about it a lot in my videos about how you have to be present enough to see opportunities, present enough to make the choice. And I feel like the more present we are and the more choices that we make in terms of our affirmations, in terms of what we feed and say to ourselves, the more we can sort of put ourselves in autopilot when it comes to things like that. I think that's the sort of key role of affirmations, is to change the way we think on a baseline. Change the way we readily think about certain scenarios and circumstances and allow us to actually start to enjoy life for what it is once again, over and over again. And it's not necessarily about doing that one time in terms of affirmations. It's about continuing them and letting them grow with you. As your goals and ideas and areas of development change, those things have to change too. And it's not necessarily saying you're leaving the other things behind, but adding on to it. I think a lot of us think that when we change or when we grow, we're taking away from ourselves, or we're shedding apart. But I don't think it's that way at all. I think it's always been some sort of a renovation or a transformation. Reestablishing what you are, a sort of renaissance of what currently is. And then appreciating what is currently here You have the potential to appreciate what's going to happen and what has already happened because everything exists right now. I was just thinking about it earlier about how I got mad the other day. Not necessarily mad, but I was being a little childish, and it reminded me of when I was actually a kid. And I think it's important to acknowledge that those parts of us are always still here. You know, you might try to suppress them, you may neglect them, you may cast them to the side, but I think uh, what isn't resolved always repeats. And it's not necessarily about how you feel, but how you react to the feeling a lot of times that determines your growth in certain situations. I think we have to, at a baseline, understand ourselves enough to take a pause at times and slow life down with our own presence and ask ourselves important questions about the way we're interacting with the world and more so the way we're interacting with the self. I feel like sometimes we get angry at other people because we're angry with, the way something made us feel about us. We're angry with the expectation that we had placed on a certain situation or person and how that relates to us. And that doesn't mean that people can escape their obligations just because you can recognize your own feelings. But recognize that sometimes negative things occur via negative emotion. And I think if we want to influence anything in a positive way or have any type of positive outcome from our situations, it's about acknowledging the potential for positivity within yourself, but also acknowledging the negativity that's there. It's about establishing some sort of dichotomy between you and the situation that you're encountering, recognizing that you're part of it, but also recognizing that you have influence over it as long as you have influence over yourself. In tying this back to celebrating yourself, you have to realize that your celebration of yourself is what allows you to keep going in a sense. I think everyone in the world could give you applause right now. And as soon as they stop, you would start to question if you were still doing the right thing. And I think it's that very reason that we need to learn how to applaud ourselves at times, because obviously it doesn't matter what the whole world thinks to your true self. It matters what you think. I think our ego may be driven for that little round of applause for a little bit. But I think that's the same thing that's going to ask us, are we still doing the right thing? Are we still worthy of applause right after? Or maybe get you big headed and be like, yeah, I deserve all the applause in the world. Why isn't everybody clapping for me? And you set up this relationship with the world that's sort of constantly in lack. We have to appreciate things as they come. And we have to appreciate ourselves as we come. There may be days where we aren't at the top of our game. There may be days where we feel like we are at the height of who we are. We have to appreciate ourselves regardless of how we look in any situation or scenario, because we have to recognize the power of our own perspective and how we look at ourselves. Because it's not about what you're looking at. It's about how you look at it. I could look at myself one day and say I don't like myself. I could never do that, but I could. And I could look at myself the next day and say I do like myself. And if we can recognize these subtle changes in our perspective and the way they influence how we feel about ourselves, then we can recognize that we can posit those thoughts for ourselves. We can give that to ourselves. We can celebrate ourselves for a change, for a chance. And if we never give ourselves a chance, then we'll never have one. I think a lot of people think the world is sort of the thing that gives everybody an opportunity, but you have to sort of make those steps too. And whether or not you want to believe in a higher source, I think you can apply that to this too. It could be ordained that you do these certain things, that you take care of yourself in a certain way, and that it opens up doors here. It's about your relationship to yourself and the world around you. It's not just about some type of single perspective where the world just is constantly bringing you stuff. I think our devotion and commitment to ourselves and our goals and aspirations, aligning ourselves with what we want, is what brings it here. It's what allows it to be here, because we, in a sense, are already acting as if it belongs to us. We're already making the steps that would say to the world, say to the gods, say to whatever, that this is what you want/deserve. And I think celebrating yourself in that sense, celebrating yourself in general, will allow you to do that so much more fervently. because you're not waiting for some sort of outcome in order to give yourself this type of appreciation. And I think a lot of us posit our goals and aspirations so far from ourselves that we can't readily give ourselves celebration. And we're constantly waiting, and we know it's going to take a long time, but we're not giving ourselves a celebration where we are. We're waiting until that time and then giving ourselves a small amount or big amount, relatively, of affirmation once we achieve our goal. But what happens after that? What happens shortly after? You reestablish a new goal, one, or you realize that you were supposed to be celebrating yourself the entire time. That you were supposed to be giving yourself love the entire time that you were embarking on whatever journey that you're on. And I think that's where, joy really comes from. I think it's the understanding of the self enough to let go of your need for outcomes and expectations to make you happy. You're the one who creates the happiness in your life, not necessarily just in virtue of the actions you give to yourself, but the actions you allow others to do and how you allow those actions to make you feel sometimes. Like there's plenty of times where good things happen. I don't really want to gas myself up, so I don't express happiness to the highest extent. There are other times where really subtle stuff happens and I try to be very happy about it. And in essence, I am. It's about, the choices that you make in terms of how you react to certain things, how you allow yourself to feel at certain times, and recognizing that you can control that. It's not necessarily an easy thing 100% of the time. There's definitely things and circumstances that can make me feel a certain way, for sure. But as long as I have any influence over myself, I'm going to try to make the choices that lead to my best good. And they don't necessarily mean external choices, but internal choices. That doesn't mean anything to me. I'm letting it go. They're probably saying that more in accordance to them than to me. Or just doing affirmations for yourself, being honest with yourself, and giving yourself appreciation and some type of intimacy with your life, just in virtue of you being a person. And letting go of your need for other people to see you the way you see yourself. And I don't mean that to say just act all willy-nilly and do more things and don't care about how society reacts. I don't think that at all. I think it takes honesty. I think it takes a recognition of how you impact others, how you impact yourself. And I think to a very subtle extent, how you impact others is how you impact yourself in a real way. If you constantly go out to the world and project some type of negativity onto other people, there's no way that you really innately feel good about yourself. And I don't mean that to say that people shouldn't feel good about themselves if they're doing anything. You should love yourself regardless. But I don't think love and being honest with yourself about your negativity can't coexist. I can love myself enough to feel the pain of my own actions, love myself enough to feel the pain of the way I influence other people, and use that same love to transform myself into something better, into something that's more aware of their actions and their influence over other people, and being more cognizant. But I don't think it has to be built innate. I think you can change yourself through love, even if that change is coming from a negative place. I think overall it just takes your ability to choose, your ability to change. Because if you plant yourself in the wrong place, you might go in the wrong direction. And I think the wrong place in this scenario is always going to be negativity. I think we have to plant ourselves in a certain amount of positivity in order to grow in a positive way. I think you can't hate yourself into being a better person. You hate yourself into hiding. You have to love yourself into being a better person, because love is the only thing that can bring you into the moment. You have to love yourself enough to let go of how you feel about everything sometimes. And I don't mean everything in the sense of the whole world, but everything in the sense of, can I love myself enough to bring myself outside of my expectations and truly enjoy this unknown moment? We don't know what's going to happen, and that's sort of the point. If we knew everything that was going to happen, then there would be no point in continuing to figure out. And I think we have to recognize that our role is to figure out. And to figure out by appreciating ourselves, loving ourselves, and existing in the moment so we can see it. I mean, loving yourself and appreciation is the only thing that we're supposed to do. But we have to be present enough to see life happen. Otherwise, we're living in our mind and it's passing us by. I feel like overall, all of life is a ode to celebration. We should be celebrating our life because we're a part of it. And if we don't celebrate even the mundane moments, then we're depriving ourselves of a subtle appreciation. Things don't have to be happening for you to feel good about yourself. Things don't have to be great in the external sense for you to feel good about who you are. That's why I feel like it's important to invest positivity in who we are. Because who we are is going to be with us 100% of the time. Who we are is not necessarily going to flip and change the same way external things do, at least in a grandiose sense. Of course, we are subject to change. Of course, we change over time. But I feel like that change can be inspired and mitigated by us, as long as we're present enough to make the choices. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. This marks the end of my 25-day episode bender. I'm taking a month, 3 weeks off, studying abroad. Videos will still be dropping consistently, as you guys have seen. And I think when the next video drops, I might still be here. I might be at the old spot. Regardless, you're getting something new. You might, hopefully, get some broad, profound ponder. Thank y'all for being y'all. Keep being y'all. Keep being great. A book is dropping. My book is dropping very soon. Very, very, very soon when this comes out. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for being y'all. A lot more on the way. A lot more is already here.